and try
Yeah.
not to go too into it, but
We're gonna try not to go into it, and we're literally talking about James Cameron's Avatar? Excuse me?
outside of just the development of games and the limitations of them, all of that, there's kind of like 2 main camps, oversimplifying of, like, what people want out of their game. Graphics as, like, a catch-all
Mhm.
term, like, the resolution, like, what you want it to look like. And, like, the first group is that group that's, like, they want it to look as real as the tech allows it to. They want it to be, like, photorealistic. These are the type of people who are, like, pushing that frames per second as far as they possibly can. They've got these 3D models that are insane. They're doing the sorts of weird tricks that we've talked about like, adding in video and like doing all these weird overlays to try to make it look as good as possible. Like these are the James Camerons of game development where like they're literally creating new technology in order to get what they want out of the game so that it can look the way that they imagine in their head. I think that like AAA spaces tend to lean more in this direction, historically, where it's been very tied to, like, consoles, like, "This is the new console that's out right now, and look at the graphics that it can perform." Like, "Look at the art that it can, like, show you, like, at this frame rate," or whatever, and so then they have games that are made to show off the new console's, like, ability, um, and you can, like, really tell that, like, that's what they're going for with all of these, like, even the cutscenes are, like, super beautiful and up close, just the fact that they can have the cutscenes at all. There's the opposite of that, that doesn't care about it as much, but with this group of people, it's, like, really, really important, and it's not even always when it comes to, like, gameplay about the gameplay. It's not even always about, like, we need high frames per second and high graphics because the gameplay requires it because, like, it's a shooter, you need to be able to see across, or, like, we need your, like, fast reaction time. It's, like, purely an aesthetic choice and a
Mhm.
marketing choice to want it to be, like, at the peak of its technology, right? Like, that's, like, what they're
Yeah.
hoping for.
I think Kojima is maybe a little guilty of this, right? Like, didn't he recently say that he was gonna 3D scan a ghost and have the first 3D scan ghost ever? Like, that's gotta be some high resolution if you got, like, the semi-transparency and all that stuff going on. Just saying, you know? But
Yeah, yeah, definitely 3D scanning people and putting them in, like, he's he's a little bit
he's got, like,
crazy.
a collection of people's models, like,
He does.
that's pretty crazy, right? Like, I can see it from his point of view, though, like, he's always like, we talked about it, right? Like, he's always the filmmaker who ended up doing video games, and now he just has, like, a collection of actors, basically, that he can, like, make do his scenes, right? Like, that's kinda where that is, but yeah, like you were saying, there's always going to be people who like that's the point, right? Like that's the thing that we want to focus on. We want to focus on better graphics for this sort of thing. And for better or worse, I think that like triple A games kind of conflate that, which is interesting, right? Like they have to have something to show off like why they are cooler or why their engine is cooler or why their hardware is cooler. Look at all the stuff that you can do, right? Like I think it was maybe Nintendo, they have a long process of greenlighting sequels, and the visual fidelity is not necessarily high on that list for a variety of reasons, right? But when they do go for that, they tend to find some sort of game that would benefit from that higher fidelity or that graphics push, but
Yeah.
in a way that it adds to it and in the way that like the gameplay has already been solved. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that, like, this like, pushing your game's graphics based off of the tech and not based off of something internal to the game, that specific camp, like, is really big on, like, sequels or remakes
Hmm.
because it's such an easy comparison and, like, so cool, especially I say not based off gameplay, but, like, for a lot of people, they would argue that, the change in the graphics does make a change in the gameplay. Like, I think the easiest
Yeah.
example of this is, like, Final Fantasy VII, where it's like, it was big blocky characters, still beautiful, but they wanted to remake it now with this new technology, and it's huge, and it looks gorgeous, and it's beautiful, but, like, it just kinda speaks to the fact that, like, this is what they wanted all along, and they were always pushing to what they had. It's just that what they had before was blocky. That was their limiter, and then this is their
Hmm.
new limiter. I mean, they even made Final Fantasy VII movie, Advent Children, in 2005 that is beautiful and doesn't look that different than the remake does today because they
Yeah.
kind of got to see like, hey, we love these characters. This is what we've always wanted them to look like. If we don't have to deal with the technology of a game console and those limiters, like we can use the technology of movies and animation, this is what the game would have looked like. And that was in 2005. And now they're like, hey, like now that it's the 2020s and we have all this new technology, this is what the game would have looked like. And it's like really cool that they get to see that. Maybe a
Hmm.
little bit frustrating because it's like, I get it. Like, it will always look better and cooler, but, like, what about the game, though? Because it's
Right.
not they are making changes in that particular instance, but when it just comes to, like, remasters, it's just interesting to see what games remasters prioritize.
Hmm.
Like, are
Or
they
how? Right.
prioritizing like, does the game look entirely different? And I think for a lot of them, the answer is yes, because they're so excited by this new technology that's, like, pushing them forward and allowing them to change so much of the art. It becomes clear that a huge amount of their art choices were based off of the technology of their time and that they would change it if they had the ability to.
My kind of hot take on that is, some days I wonder if it isn't movies that should be the ones like trying to push the new VFX and trying to do that because of what we kind of talked about. Like, their goal is to render something that will be rendered to film, to digital, to print, right? Like, it's not interactive. So let's push the fidelity of how it looks. Let's make them really look nice. Let's really make them pop. Like funding wise, that also kind of makes sense, right? Because in a movie, you kind of want that high fidelity. Funding that research is a part of that. But like you mentioned, in games, it's not just graphics, it's also that gameplay sort of stuff, right? So I actually think that games would benefit a little more if they cooled off from trying to be the best VFX rendering sort of stuff at home, and maybe instead look at what the industry is doing in terms of like those really crazy things, and then trying to see how you can do them in a practical way, or how you can find some cool workarounds or tricks that makes you that gets you part of the way there. I kind of feel like competing directly with the latest movie, maybe not James Cameron, but even some other stuff, is kind of a losing battle, and it's splitting your resources in terms of that, right? It is crazy though, in terms of like the VFX world, how many game engines are now being used to produce some of the TV show stuff. Like Disney and Star Wars is doing this, right? Like I think they're using like Unreal for some of their backgrounds on some of the Star Wars stuff.
I agree that, like, movies are also pushing this forward, and there's a lot of stuff
Hmm.
like that, like, where they're pushing I think there's also the same complaints that people have, like, in games like me, where I'm like, "It's beautiful and it's great, but, like, what else?" Kind
Yeah.
of I
Yeah.
think that that happens in movies as well, where people are starting to get a bit of a pushback against, like, these actors are acting at a green screen, and, like, I'm watching a movie that's just random rainbow light colors everywhere, and they're
Hmm.
not in a place, or, you know, the Barbie movie very famously used, like, all real sets for everything, and people loved that, at least as far as I saw, like,
Yeah.
there's kind of this like, people aren't as impressed by just the fact that there is technology. It's kind of like the output is becoming more important. I think when the technology is new, it's such a marketing thing that people are like, the fact that the technology exists and it made that is the cool thing. And like the older the technology gets, the more people are like, I don't really care that you used the technology to make this. I want the outcome to be the cool part. And I think that we're kind
Yeah.
of getting there with games too, where it's like, we can make so much stuff. Yeah, it looks absolutely gorgeous, and it takes, like, 24 hours to download, and I, like, get it, and it's really cool, but, like, what else? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's kind of a personal opinion. I think a lot of people really do enjoy the graphics, and I'm not gonna say that they didn't blow me away when I started the Final Fantasy
Oh
remake,
yeah.
like, it's incredible, but
I mean, even the original release of Final Fantasy VII made it feel so big just because
yeah.
of their rendered cutscenes and stuff like that. Like you said, there was always a goal that they were trying to reach. They didn't quite reach it back then with the available tech, but they certainly still pushed it. And like you
Yeah.
said, I really do appreciate that when you do see that. I just don't see it being the main focus, right? Or at least I think it could be detrimental. I think that's a better way to put it, right? Like because
Yes.
you're splitting your focus on it. You're not just doing it in service for the game, like we already kind of talked about, right? Like some of the FPSs, some of the RTSs, all that sort of stuff, the real time strategy, the first person shooters, they need that twitch. And they need you to have that information right away. Racing games too, right? Like that same sort of thing. But if your game doesn't need that and it's a nice to have, it shouldn't be a driving force for the development of that. I think that's a trap because so much focus can go to that. And actually, here's a great example, right? Like you always kind of hear about not chasing that because there's been so many games that have gone through development hell because they switched or upgraded their engine, not because of what it could do under the hood in terms of like resource management or anything like that, but because it had a better rendering engine on top of it. And so you upgrade it, and then suddenly, like, you have to upgrade your system calls, you have to upgrade all this other stuff. You give yourself so much tech debt to do that. And by the time that you're finished with that, with addressing that tech debt, if you do, another version of Unreal or Unity or whatever or Godot is out, and they have a better rendering engine. And it's so easy to fall into the trap of just keep chasing that best quality,
Right.
that best fidelity at the expense of your game's other goals.
Right. Definitely. I mean, it is gratifying when you can tell that, like, the game wasn't made to look like that because that's what they wanted it to look like. It's because they had a limit and now they don't and they're very happy about it. That's great, but yeah, it's a little frustrating when that's like the only goal or when it seems like it's like a marketing tactic more than anything else, for sure.
Or, sometimes how the rendering can outpace the games, but the idea that your cutscenes and your other like pre-render stuff is so good that it ends up overshadowing some of the in-game stuff, and that can be super jarring. Like Donkey Kong Country, like the original Donkey Kong Country and Star Fox are great kind of examples of some of this sort of stuff that we're talking about, where the old Donkey Kong Country used to have these supercomputers that would render the monkeys, and that's how they pitched it to Nintendo in terms of like, look at how cool this is. Like you can
Look
literally
at the
touch that banana.
monkey. Yeah.
Yeah, look at that monkey, like that sort of thing, right? Um, and they were like, yeah, that monkey looks great. Put it on there. So then they had to figure out how to make that run on the Super Nintendo. Great, like great Rare, you did that, but now what, right? And what they ended up doing was basically like the same thing Mortal Kombat did, right? For their photorealistic sort of stuff. They rendered out a movie and then they cut all the sprites out of it. So it was basically just another way to do like the sprite animation, but because it was rendered with this super high powered thing, it looked like it was completely 3D, right? Like it gave us a taste of like 2.5D platformers before
Yeah.
they were a thing, right? Which was kind of cool. But then again, there's also things like Star Fox, which also ran on the SNES, that was doing 3D rendering on the game cart, but to the point where it needed so many resources, it had to have another chip in it. And I would say that the result is cool from a technical point of view, and also, people love Star Fox because of the animals and all that sort of stuff. But let's be real, like the design of the X-wing at that time, right, with the polygon design, leaves something to be desired, even if it was cutting edge at that time, right? Like they held up the coolness of what they could do with 3D things, and at the same time, they tried to deliver a good game. But you could tell the moment that you could upgrade those graphics, they were going to, and that's
Yeah.
kind of been the push for Star Fox too, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah, you can definitely tell when a game it's like it's just waiting, right? Like it's waiting for it to get
yeah,
better versus not. Yeah.
it needs a James Cameron or Kojima, I guess, maybe.
Right.
Someone who's like, we're gonna push this to whatever. Or like you said, you can try and do it again, like Final Fantasy remake and stuff. Yeah.
Yes. Thanks for listening to us talk about resolutions in games. If you want to hear other game topics, you can find us everywhere on social media, Patreon, Substack, Blue Sky, at Video Game Workshop. We talk about all sorts of game development topics and game design, and we'll hope to see you later. Thanks. Bye.